The fluorescent lights flickered and buzzed overhead as Maria Reyes carefully arranged her tools for the day. The maintenance department at Westmore Military Research Facility was always the first to wake up and the last to sleep. While engineers and scientists worked their 9-to-5 schedules, the maintenance crew existed in the shadows, fixing what was broken and ensuring everything ran smoothly. Maria's hands, calloused and strong, methodically checked each screwdriver, wrench, and multimeter in her weathered toolkit, tools that had been with her longer than any relationship. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. "Morning, Reyes," called Sam, the facility's head of maintenance, his voice echoing through the empty corridors. "Got a busy one for you today. Air handlers in the East Wing are acting up again, 2 bathroom fixtures need replacing, and there's a flickering light panel in Lab 12 that's driving Dr. Harrison insane." Maria nodded, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "On it, boss." She kept her responses brief and professional. 5 years at Westmore had taught her that the less she said, the fewer questions people asked. And questions were dangerous. At 34, Maria had mastered the art of invisibility. She wore plain gray coveralls that matched the facility walls, kept her head down in hallways, and finished her work with quiet efficiency that never drew attention. This invisibility was her armor, carefully constructed and maintained since the day she'd arrived in this small military town of Creston, Colorado, a place so insignificant it barely registered on maps. As she pushed her maintenance cart toward the East Wing, Maria passed the high-security laboratories where the facility's real work happened. Behind those reinforced doors, scientists and military specialists developed advanced weapon systems that would never make the evening news, the kind of weapons she used to design. Maria quickened her pace, pushing away memories that threatened to surface. The past was a luxury she couldn't afford, not when she'd worked so hard to bury it. She focused instead on the air handler system, a relatively simple problem for someone with her background, though she would make sure to take the appropriate amount of time a regular maintenance worker would need. The morning passed in a familiar rhythm of routine repairs. The air handlers needed recalibration, a task Maria could have done in her sleep but carefully stretched to 90 minutes. The bathroom fixtures were replaced with deliberate, unhurried movements. By lunchtime, she had only the flickering light panel in Lab 12 remaining. ID and authorization demanded the security guard at the laboratory wing checkpoint. Despite seeing her nearly every day for 5 years, the guards always treated her like a potential security threat. Maria sometimes wondered if they simply couldn't remember her face, her invisibility strategy working too well. She handed over her Level 2 maintenance badge, the lowest security clearance possible at Westmore. Just enough to fix basic infrastructure, but nowhere near enough to access any sensitive information. The guard scanned her badge, checked her toolkit for prohibited items, and waved her through with barely a glance. Lab 12 was unusually busy when Maria arrived. Normally, she preferred to work in empty rooms, slipping in and fixing problems without interrupting anyone's day. Today, however, she found herself navigating around a cluster of uniformed men with stern expressions and perfect postures. Navy SEALs. Even without their insignia, Maria would have recognized their distinctive bearing, the hypervigilant eyes, the controlled movements, the unspoken communication that flowed between them. They stood around a table examining what appeared to be a disassembled weapon system. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Maintenance," Maria announced quietly, gesturing toward the ceiling panel. A tall man with salt and pepper hair turned to study her with piercing blue eyes. Commander Richard Vance, though Maria shouldn't have known his name or rank. She kept her gaze neutral and her posture slightly hunched, projecting the demeanor of someone who posed no threat and deserved no attention. "Make it quick," he ordered, his voice carrying the weight of someone accustomed to instant obedience. "We're in the middle of something important." Maria nodded and set up her ladder beneath the flickering panel. As she climbed, she couldn't help overhearing fragments of their conversation. "The targeting system keeps failing during final testing," said a younger SEAL with lieutenant's bars. "Lab techs can't figure out why." "Third prototype with the same issue," added another. "Pentagon's getting impatient. They want this deployed by next quarter. Maria focused on the light panel, removing the cover to expose the wiring within. But her mind was already analyzing the problem they were discussing. From their descriptions and the components visible on the table, she recognized the system immediately. An advanced targeting mechanism for underwater deployment, likely for the new class of autonomous surveillance drones the Navy had been developing. Her fingers worked on the faulty wiring while her brain automatically calculated potential failure points in the weapon system below. The problem was obvious to her trained eye. A thermal regulation issue in the guidance system that would cause it to fail in variable temperature underwater environments. A simple design flaw that any experienced weapons engineer would catch. But Maria Reyes was just a maintenance worker, the kind who fixed light panels and air handlers, not million-dollar military hardware. 3 months behind schedule, Commander Vance was saying, frustration evident in his tone. If we can't get this working reliably, the entire project gets scrapped. Maria's hands paused imperceptibly as she processed this information. Scrapped projects meant budget cuts. Budget cuts meant potential layoffs. And being unemployed meant increased scrutiny during the job search process. The kind of scrutiny that might uncover the careful fiction she'd constructed around her identity. She replaced the faulty ballast, tested the connection, and watched the light panel stabilize. Job completed in exactly the amount of time it should take a maintenance worker, with basic electrical knowledge. Not too fast, not too slow, just invisible enough. As she descended the ladder, Maria made the mistake of glancing at the weapon system on the table. The younger lieutenant caught her look and frowned. "Something interesting?" he asked, his tone immediately suspicious. Maria shook her head. "No, sir. Just making sure I didn't leave any tools up there." "You seemed pretty focused on our equipment," he pressed, stepping closer. His name tag read, Lieutenant Daniels. Jason. Commander Vance warned quietly, but the lieutenant wasn't backing down. "You know anything about weapons systems, maintenance lady?" Daniels asked, his voice carrying a note of condescension that made Maria's spine stiffen involuntarily. "No, sir," she replied, keeping her voice neutral despite the spark of indignation flaring in her chest. "Just lights and plumbing." Something in her tone must have betrayed her because Daniels' eyes narrowed. "You sure about that? Because you were looking at this hardware like you recognized it." Maria felt the other SEALs turning to watch the exchange. The careful invisibility she'd maintained for 5 years was suddenly at risk because of one observant lieutenant and her own momentary lapse in discipline. "Leave her alone, Daniels," said another SEAL, this one with a weathered face and calm demeanor. "She's just doing her job." "I don't know, Chief," Daniels replied, still studying Maria. "Something doesn't add up. Hey, maintenance lady, where did you work before Westmore?" 5 years of practiced responses kicked in automatically. County Facilities Department in Nebraska. Before that, janitorial services at a high school. The lies rolled off her tongue smoothly, rehearsed countless times for moments exactly like this. Commander Vance stepped forward, clearly impatient with the interruption. "If you're finished with the lights, you can go." Maria nodded gratefully and began packing her tools with deliberate movements. "Don't rush," she reminded herself. "Don't appear nervous. Just another invisible day for an invisible person." As she pushed her cart toward the door, Lieutenant Daniels called after her. "Hey, what's your name?" "Maria Reyes," she answered without turning around, keeping her voice flat and unremarkable. "Well, Reyes," he said, "if you ever decide you know something about targeting systems, let us know." The sarcasm in his voice was unmistakable, but there was something else there too. A subtle note of genuine curiosity that troubled Maria more than outright suspicion would have. Curiosity led to questions. Questions led to investigations. And investigations would inevitably lead to the truth she'd spent 5 years burying. That night, in her small apartment on the outskirts of Creston, Maria sat at her kitchen table with a glass of red wine, turning the day's events over in her mind. The encounter with the SEALs had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. For 5 years, she had successfully maintained her cover as just another maintenance worker, skilled enough to do her job well, but not so exceptional that anyone would look twice. 5 years of deliberately average performance evaluations. 5 years of declining optional social gatherings with coworkers. 5 years of carefully constructed ordinariness that protected her from the past she'd fled. Maria opened her laptop and hesitated before typing in a search query. She knew she shouldn't. Checking would only reopen old wounds, but the weapon system she'd seen today had triggered her professional curiosity, and after 5 years of suppressing her intellect, the temptation was too strong to resist. The search results confirmed what she'd suspected. The Navy's new Autonomous Underwater Surveillance System, AUSS, had been in development for over 3 years with repeated delays due to targeting system failures. The articles didn't specify the exact nature of the failures, but Maria didn't need them to. She'd seen enough today to diagnose the problem instantly. A thermal regulation flaw in the guidance system, so obvious to her trained eye, yet apparently invisible to the engineers currently working on the project. Maria closed her laptop and rubbed her temples. It wasn't her problem. It couldn't be her problem, not without risking everything she'd built here. Before Creston, before Westmore, Maria Reyes had been Dr. Elena Marquez, one of the Defense Department's most brilliant weapons engineers. With multiple patents and groundbreaking designs to her name, she had been on track to revolutionize military technology until she discovered her research was being sold to foreign governments by someone inside her own team. When she reported it, the betrayal had come swift and devastating. Her whistleblowing was rewarded not with gratitude but with calculated destruction. Evidence was fabricated, placing her at the center of the espionage ring. Former colleagues turned against her. Her reputation was systematically dismantled in a matter of weeks. Though eventually cleared of all charges, Elena Marquez was professionally ruined. No defense contractor would touch her. Former colleagues avoided her calls. The Pentagon itself, while privately acknowledging her innocence, publicly maintained a cautious distance. So Elena disappeared, leaving behind her prestigious career, her awards, and her identity. With the help of a sympathetic former mentor, she created Maria Reyes, a woman with a fabricated past and deliberately unremarkable credentials. A woman designed to be forgotten as soon as she left a room. Now staring at her wine glass, Maria confronted the reality that her carefully constructed anonymity had developed its first crack. Lieutenant Daniels had noticed something in her eyes when she looked at that weapon system, a flash of recognition and understanding that didn't belong in the gaze of a simple maintenance worker. She should request a transfer to another department, perhaps even look for work in another town. The rational choice was to distance herself from any situation that might expose her true identity. But as she prepared for bed, Maria couldn't stop thinking about the thermal regulation problem in the targeting system. Such a simple fix for someone with her knowledge. A minor adjustment to the cooling mechanism, a recalibration of the temperature sensors, and the system would function perfectly in any underwater environment. The next morning, Maria arrived at work earlier than usual. She needed to check the maintenance request system before the day's assignments were distributed. Sure enough, there was a new request from Lab 12. Something about a malfunctioning ventilation duct. Normally, such a task would go to whoever was assigned to that wing for the day, but Maria quickly logged in and claimed it for herself before anyone else arrived. "Taking initiative this morning?" Sam asked when he found her already reviewing the day's work orders. Maria shrugged. "Couldn't sleep. Figured I might as well get an early start." Sam studied her with mild surprise. In 5 years, Maria had never volunteered for extra work or shown particular enthusiasm for any assignment. She had always done exactly what was expected of her, no more, no less. "Well, don't burn yourself out," he said finally. "Got the rest of the week to get through." Maria nodded and gathered her tools, careful not to appear too eager as she headed toward Lab 12. The security checkpoint was quieter this early, with only one guard on duty who waved her through after a cursory check of her credentials. The laboratory was empty when she arrived. Exactly as she'd hoped. The SEALs wouldn't arrive until their scheduled meeting at 09:00, giving her nearly 2 hours to work undisturbed. The ventilation issue was legitimate, requiring about 45 minutes of her time to properly address. But it wasn't the real reason she was here. Once the ventilation duct was repaired, Maria took a calculated risk. She moved to the weapon system still laid out on the table from yesterday. No security cameras covered this specific angle of the room, a detail she'd noted years ago and filed away as potentially useful information. With quick, practiced movements, Maria examined the disassembled targeting system. Her hands moved with a confidence and precision they hadn't displayed in 5 years, expertly assessing each component. As suspected, the thermal regulation system was fundamentally flawed, designed to operate within parameters that wouldn't accommodate the variable temperatures of actual underwater deployment. The fix was simple for someone with her expertise. Using only the tools in her maintenance kit, Maria made subtle adjustments to the cooling mechanism and recalibrated the temperature sensors. Nothing that would appear obviously tampered with, but changes that would allow the system to function properly in any underwater environment. She worked with focused intensity, losing herself in the familiar rhythm of engineering problem-solving. For 15 precious minutes, Maria Reyes disappeared, and Dr. Elena Marquez resurfaced, brilliant, confident, and in her element. When she finished, Maria carefully returned everything to its exact position, wiped down any surfaces she'd touched, and collected her maintenance tools. By the time she left Lab 12, there was no evidence she'd done anything beyond fixing the ventilation system, except for a targeting mechanism that would now function flawlessly. As she pushed her cart back toward the maintenance department, Maria felt a complex mixture of emotions. Pride in her work, the first real engineering she'd done in 5 years. Fear of discovery, if anyone realized the system had been modified overnight. And a surprising sense of satisfaction. She'd solved a problem that had stumped an entire team of specialists. "Problem fixed?" Sam asked when she returned. "Just a blocked filter and loose connection," Maria replied with practiced casualness. "Nothing complicated." The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine tasks. Fixing a leaking pipe in the administrative wing, replacing damaged ceiling tiles in the cafeteria, troubleshooting a malfunctioning door lock in the west corridor. The kind of invisible work that maintained her invisible existence. But something had changed inside Maria. That brief return to her true expertise had awakened something she'd spent 5 years suppressing. The brilliant mind that had once revolutionized weapon systems. Like flexing a muscle long held immobile, the experience left her both invigorated and aching for more. At 1,600 hours, as Maria was completing her final task of the day, her radio crackled with Sam's voice. "Reyes, you're needed in Lab 12. Something about the ventilation work you did this morning." Maria's heart rate doubled instantly. Had they discovered her modifications? Had she made some careless mistake that revealed her true expertise? "On my way," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite the anxiety flooding her system. The walk to Lab 12 felt longer than usual, each step carrying her closer to potential exposure. By the time she reached the security checkpoint, Maria had mentally prepared 3 different explanations for any questions about the ventilation repair. She had not, however, prepared for what actually awaited her. Lab 12 was filled with people when she arrived. The SEAL team from yesterday, laboratory technicians, and several high-ranking military officials Maria recognized but pretended not to. Everyone wore expressions ranging from excitement to disbelief. Commander Vance spotted her first. "Maintenance," he called, waving her over with unexpected enthusiasm. Perfect timing. Maria approached cautiously, her body language deliberately humble and unassuming. "There's a problem with the ventilation work?" "Ventilation?" Vance looked momentarily confused. "No, that's working fine. We called you here for something else entirely." Lieutenant Daniels stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "We ran the targeting system through testing this morning. It performed perfectly. Every test scenario, every temperature variation, flawless performance." Maria maintained a neutral expression while her mind raced. "That's good news?" "It's miraculous," said one of the lab technicians, a bespectacled man who was staring at data readings with obvious amazement. "Yesterday, we couldn't get it to maintain target lock for more than 90 seconds in variable temperatures. Today, it's functioning at 100% efficiency across all environmental parameters." "The only thing that changed," Daniels continued, watching Maria intently, "was that you fixed the ventilation system this morning, while you were alone in the lab." The accusation hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Maria felt the weight of every gaze in the room. The careful invisibility she'd maintained for 5 years suddenly stripped away under their collective scrutiny. "I don't understand," she said, her voice carefully confused. "I just replaced a filter and tightened some connections. Standard maintenance work." Commander Vance exchanged glances with an older man wearing a general's stars who had been observing silently from the corner. "Ms. Reyes," Vance said slowly, "our security cameras show you spent 15 minutes at this table after completing the ventilation repair. 15 minutes working on a classified weapon system you shouldn't know anything about." Maria's carefully constructed world began crumbling around her. The security camera she'd thought was a blind spot must have been recently installed, or repositioned, a fundamental error in her calculation. And now the truth she'd hidden for 5 years was about to be exposed. "I can explain," she began, though she had no idea what explanation could possibly suffice. "I'm sure you can, Dr. Marquez," said the general, stepping forward and using the name Maria hadn't heard spoken aloud in 5 years. "Or do you prefer Maria Reyes these days?" The room fell silent. Maria felt her carefully constructed identity dissolving, leaving only the truth she'd been running from since she fled Washington, with nothing but a fabricated resume and the desperate need to disappear. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "We didn't," said Commander Vance. "Not until Lieutenant Daniels noticed something in your expression yesterday. Something that didn't belong in the eyes of a maintenance worker." He ran a facial recognition search against Defense Department personnel records going back 10 years. "Quite a surprise to find that our maintenance worker is actually Dr. Elena Marquez," Daniels added, his earlier suspicion now replaced with something like respect. "The same Dr. Marquez whose targeting systems revolutionized drone technology before she disappeared 5 years ago amid espionage allegations. Allegations that were proven false." The general interjected firmly, "Though apparently too late to prevent us from losing one of our most brilliant minds to a maintenance department in Colorado." Maria looked around the room, seeing her dual identity reflected in their expressions, some still processing that the unassuming maintenance worker they'd barely noticed for years was actually a weapons design genius, others clearly recognizing the implications of her presence here. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. The general stepped forward, extending his hand. "Now, Dr. Marquez, we'd like to offer you your old job back, with significant apologies, back pay, and the restoration of your security clearance." Maria stared at his outstretched hand. The path back to her former life suddenly opened before her. After 5 years of hiding her brilliance, of deliberately diminishing herself to remain unnoticed, the recognition of her true value was almost overwhelming, but suspicion lingered. "Why now? Why would you trust me after what happened?" "Because we finally caught the real culprit," Commander Vance explained. 6 months ago, your former supervisor, Dr. Hammond, he was the one selling secrets, the one who framed you when you got too close to the truth. We've been trying to locate you ever since," added the general, "but you did an impressive job of disappearing." Maria absorbed this information slowly, the vindication she'd stopped hoping for years ago washing over her in waves. Hammond, the mentor who had helped build her career before systematically destroying it when she threatened to expose him. "And the targeting system?" she asked, gesturing toward the table. "How did you know it was me?" Lieutenant Daniels smiled slightly. "No one else could have fixed a problem that stumped our entire engineering team using nothing but maintenance tools in 15 minutes flat. That kind of brilliance leaves a signature, Dr. Marquez." For the first time in 5 years, Maria allowed herself to stand at her full height, shoulders back, no longer hunching to appear smaller and less significant. The posture of Dr. Elena Marquez, brilliant weapons engineer, rather than Maria Reyes, invisible maintenance worker. "I'll need time to think about your offer," she said finally. 5 years is a long time to be someone else. I'm not sure I can simply step back into my old life." The general nodded. "Take all the time you need. But know that your country needs you, Dr. Marquez. Particularly now." As the implications of this statement registered, Maria realized her world had irrevocably changed. The careful anonymity she'd constructed was gone, replaced by the weight of her true identity and all the expectations that came with it. Walking out of Lab 12, Maria felt dozens of eyes following her, not with the dismissive glances that had allowed her to remain invisible for 5 years, but with the respectful attention reserved for someone of importance. The maintenance worker was gone, and in her place stood a woman whose brilliant mind could change the course of national security. The question now was whether she was ready to reclaim that responsibility after fighting so hard to escape it. The harsh morning light filtered through dusty blinds as Maria stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. For 5 years, she had carefully cultivated the appearance of Maria Reyes. Her hair in a simple ponytail, face free of makeup, posture slightly hunched to appear smaller and less significant. Today, her hands trembled as she straightened her spine and watched a glimpse of Elena Marquez emerge in her reflection. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Last night had been sleepless, her mind cycling through the implications of being discovered. The Pentagon wanted her back, needed her back, according to the general. Her name had been cleared, her betrayer exposed and presumably imprisoned. The path back to her former life lay open before her, yet Maria hesitated at the threshold. She dressed with deliberate care, selecting one of the few outfits she owned that wasn't chosen specifically to help her blend into backgrounds. A charcoal blazers over a simple white blouse, paired with dark jeans, professional without being ostentatious. For the first time in 5 years, she applied a touch of makeup, transforming maintenance worker Maria Reyes into something closer to Dr. Elena Marquez. The drive to Westmore that morning felt surreal. For half a decade, she had taken the same route, parked in the same section of the employee lot, entered through the same side entrance, and followed the same path to the maintenance department. Today, the security guard at the checkpoint did a double-take when she presented her ID. "Ms. Reyes?" he questioned, looking between her face and the photo on her badge. "Yes," she confirmed. "I have a meeting in the executive wing this morning." The guard's eyebrows lifted, but he simply nodded and waved her through. Already, the invisibility was fading. People who had walked past her for years without a second glance now turned to watch her pass, whispering behind cupped hands. News traveled fast in a military research facility. Instead of turning toward the maintenance department, Maria headed for the executive conference room where she'd been instructed to meet General Preston and Commander Vance. With each step, she felt herself transforming, standing taller, walking with more purpose, reclaiming the confidence she had deliberately suppressed for so long. Outside the conference room, Lieutenant Daniels waited, his expression respectful but cautious. "Dr. Marquez." He greeted her, using her real name without hesitation. "They're expecting you." "It's still Maria until I decide otherwise," she replied quietly. Daniels nodded, accepting the correction. "They've assembled quite a team to convince you to come back, including some faces from your past." Before Maria could ask for clarification, the lieutenant opened the door, revealing a conference room filled with military officials and civilian contractors. The conversation halted as all eyes turned toward her. Maria recognized several faces immediately: former colleagues from her Pentagon days, representatives from defense contractors who had once competed to fund her research, and at the head of the table, General Preston. But it was the woman standing by the window who made Maria's breath catch. Dr. Sophia Chen, her former research partner and closest friend before the Hammond scandal, had separated them. The last time they had spoken, Sophia had been coldly professional, clearly believing the allegations against Maria. "Elena?" Sophia said softly, using the name that had once been so familiar between them. "It's been a long time." Maria nodded stiffly, unsure how to respond to the woman who had once been like a sister to her before abandoning her when the accusations flew. General Preston cleared his throat. "Dr. Marquez, or Maria, if you prefer, please have a seat. We have much to discuss." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maria took the offered chair, positioning herself with a clear view of the exit, a habit formed during years of looking over her shoulder. "I appreciate the invitation, General, but I haven't agreed to anything yet." "Understood," Preston replied, his tone respectful. "We're not here to pressure you. We're here to present facts and options, and then the decision is entirely yours." For the next hour, Maria listened as they outlined the situation. Hammond's espionage had been more extensive than anyone had initially suspected. For nearly a decade, he had been selling classified weapons research to multiple foreign governments, amassing a fortune in offshore accounts while systematically undermining America's technological advantage. "When you began noticing discrepancies in the research data," explained a Justice Department official, "Hammond realized you were getting close to exposing him. That's when he manufactured evidence against you, using his senior position to make the allegations stick." "I know all this," Maria interjected. What I don't understand is why it took 5 years to uncover the truth. 5 years of my life, gone." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room before Sophia spoke up. "Because we were looking in the wrong direction, Elena." Hammond was brilliant at misdirection. He didn't just frame you. He created an elaborate network of false leads that kept counterintelligence chasing shadows for years. "How was he finally caught?" Maria asked. "Ironically, because of your work," Commander Vance explained. "The targeting system you designed before leaving was finally deployed 2 years ago. Hammond had sold critical components of its design to a foreign military. When their version appeared in the field, it had your distinctive engineering signature all over it. Certain computational shortcuts that are uniquely yours. That sent us looking more closely at Hammond," General Preston continued. "Once we started pulling that thread, his entire operation unraveled. He's currently serving a life sentence at a federal supermax facility." Maria absorbed this information, a complex mixture of vindication and bitterness washing over her. "So my reputation was destroyed, my career obliterated, and my life upended because no one bothered to investigate thoroughly enough the first time." Several officials shifted uncomfortably in their seats. It was Sophia who finally responded, her voice thick with regret. "Yes. And I was among those who failed you, Elena. I should have known you better. Should have fought harder for you." Maria met her former friend's gaze, seeing genuine remorse there. But 5 years of isolation and paranoia had built walls that couldn't be dismantled in a single morning. "What exactly do you want from me?" Maria asked, turning back to General Preston. The general exchanged glances with Commander Vance before responding. "We want to formally reinstate you to your previous position, with promotions, back pay, and full restoration of your security clearance. We need your expertise, particularly on the AUSS project you glimpsed yesterday." "The targeting system was just one component," Vance added. "The entire project has been plagued with technical issues we believe you could solve." Maria considered the offer. The chance to reclaim her identity, to work again at the cutting edge of her field, to be recognized for her brilliance rather than hiding it. These were powerful incentives. But returning meant re-entering a world that had once betrayed her utterly, placing her trust in an institution that had failed to protect her. "I need time," she said finally, "and more information. Before I make any decision, I want full access to the Hammond investigation files and complete details on the AUSS project." General Preston nodded. "Granted, we've prepared temporary credentials for you." He slid a badge across the table, a top-secret clearance with her real name, Dr. Elena Marquez, printed beneath her photograph. "Lieutenant Daniels will escort you to a secure briefing room where you can review everything." As the meeting adjourned, Sophia approached Maria, hesitation evident in her movements. "Elena, I know you probably don't want to hear this right now, but I need to say it. I'm sorry. I should have believed in you." Maria studied her former friend's face, searching for the sincerity she desperately wanted to find there. 5 years is a long time, Sophia. I'm not the same person you knew." "I understand," Sophia replied softly, "but I hope eventually you might give me the chance to know the person you've become." Before Maria could respond, Lieutenant Daniels appeared at her side. "Dr. Marquez, if you're ready, I'll show you to the briefing room." With a final nod to Sophia, Maria followed Daniels through the facility's corridors, now walking the path of a respected scientist rather than an invisible maintenance worker. The transition was jarring. Security doors opened automatically for her new credentials. People stepped aside respectfully as she passed, and even the lighting seemed different in the executive wing of the facility. The briefing room was a stark contrast to the maintenance department's cluttered break room. Sleek computers, comfortable chairs, and a wall of monitors displaying real-time data from various military operations around the globe. Maria felt simultaneously at home and utterly out of place, like returning to a childhood bedroom after decades away. "I'll be outside if you need anything," Daniels said, preparing to leave her with the classified files. "Lieutenant," Maria called after him, "why did you notice me in the lab that day? Hundreds of people have looked right through me for 5 years. What made you different?" Daniels considered the question carefully. "My father was a mechanic," he said finally. "Not educated, but brilliant with engines. Could diagnose problems just by listening to them. I recognized that same look in your eyes when you glanced at our targeting system. The look of someone who understands something deeply instinctively. It didn't match your coveralls. With that insight, he left Maria alone with the files that documented both her disgrace and her vindication. For hours, she immersed herself in the evidence against Hammond, the trail of his betrayal, and the painstaking investigation that had eventually cleared her name. The more she read, the more her anger crystallized, not just at Hammond, but at the system that had been so quick to believe the worst of her. When she finally accessed the AUSS project files, Maria's engineering mind engaged automatically. The autonomous underwater surveillance system was exactly what its name suggested. A network of AI-driven drones designed to monitor hostile waters without human intervention. The concept was sound, but the execution was flawed in multiple areas beyond just the targeting system she'd already fixed. As she scrolled through technical specifications and test results, Maria felt the familiar intellectual excitement that had once defined her life, the thrill of encountering complex problems that demanded elegant solutions. Her fingers itched to redesign components, recalibrate systems, reimagine the entire approach. A soft knock interrupted her focus. Lieutenant Daniels stood in the doorway holding a tray with sandwiches and coffee. "Thought you might be hungry. You've been in here for 7 hours." Maria blinked in surprise, having lost all track of time. "Thank you," she said, accepting the offered food. "I didn't realize it was so late." "Finding what you need in the files?" he asked, maintaining a respectful distance. Maria nodded, taking a bite of the sandwich. "The AUSS project is fascinating, but fundamentally flawed in its current configuration. The thermal regulation issue I fixed was just the beginning. The propulsion system, the AI decision-making protocols, the power distribution network, they all need significant redesign." Daniel smiled slightly. "And there it is again." "What?" "That look of someone who not only sees the problem, but already knows the solution. The maintenance worker is gone completely now." Maria set down her sandwich, suddenly self-conscious. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's looking," Daniels replied. "Most people see what they expect to see. For 5 years, they expected to see a maintenance worker, so that's all they saw." His insight struck Maria deeply. She had succeeded in disappearing not just because of her careful construction of Maria Reyes, but because people rarely looked beyond surface appearances. They categorized her as maintenance staff, and therefore invisible, just as they had once categorized her as a potential spy without questioning the evidence. "Why are you helping me, Lieutenant?" she asked directly. Daniels considered the question. "Because talent like yours shouldn't be wasted changing light bulbs. Because the country needs your mind more than your ability to fix air handlers. And because I believe in second chances." His sincerity was unexpected, as was the simple respect in his tone, not patronizing, not flirtatious, just the straightforward recognition of her value that had been absent from her life for 5 years. "I should finish reviewing these files," Maria said, suddenly uncomfortable with the personal direction of the conversation. Daniels nodded and turned to leave. "For what it's worth, Dr. Marquez, you'd be making a difference that matters if you came back. The AUSS project isn't just another weapons system. It's a defensive technology that could prevent unnecessary conflicts by providing better intelligence. The kind of work worth doing." After he left, Maria returned to the files with renewed focus, but her mind kept returning to his words. The kind of work worth doing. Wasn't that what had drawn her to defense research in the first place? Not the creation of destruction, but the prevention of it through technological superiority. The chance to protect without harming, to defend without aggression. By midnight, Maria had reviewed every document, analyzed every technical specification, and reached her decision. She gathered her notes and left the briefing room, finding Lieutenant Daniels still waiting outside despite the late hour. "I need to speak with General Preston," she said. "Tonight, if possible." Daniels nodded without question, leading her through the nearly deserted facility to a secure communication room. Within minutes, the general's face appeared on the video screen, looking tired but alert. "Dr. Marquez," he greeted her. "I take it you've reached a decision?" "I have," Maria confirmed. "I'll return to work on the AUSS project, but on my terms." Preston's eyebrows lifted slightly. "And those terms would be?" "Complete autonomy over the engineering team. Final authority on all design decisions. and a public statement from the Pentagon clearing my name and acknowledging the mistake made 5 years ago. The general considered her demands. The first two are easily granted. The public statement is more complicated. There are national security implications in acknowledging that Hammond's espionage went undetected for so long. Those are my conditions, Maria stated firmly. I spent 5 years living as someone else because my reputation was destroyed. I won't come back without its restoration. Preston studied her for a long moment before nodding. Agreed. We'll issue a statement tomorrow. When can you start? I already have, Maria replied, holding up her notes on the AUSS project. The propulsion system needs a complete redesign. The current configuration creates micro-turbulence patterns that interfere with the sensor array in deep water environments. A smile spread across the general's face, the expression of a man who had just acquired a valuable asset. Welcome back, Dr. Marquez. After the call ended, Maria sat in silence, processing the magnitude of her decision. After 5 years of deliberate invisibility, she had chosen to step back into the light, to reclaim not just her name, but her voice and her power. Will you miss her? Daniels asked quietly from the doorway. Miss who? Maria Reyes, the woman you became. The question caught her off guard. Would she miss the simplicity of maintenance work? The freedom from the political pressures of high-level research? The anonymity that had protected her for so long? Parts of her, Maria admitted. Maria was safe in ways Elena never could be. But she was also diminished, living as less than I am. Daniels nodded in understanding. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. Hiding your light doesn't serve anyone, not you, not the country, not the world. As they walked through the darkened facility, Maria realized she was traveling a familiar path, but in reverse. From the executive wing back toward the maintenance department, where her tools and coveralls still waited in a locker with Maria Reyes's name on it. I need to get a few things, she explained, using her maintenance key to enter the department one last time. The space was deserted at this hour, the tools hanging in their appointed places, the break room coffee pot cleaned and ready for morning. For 5 years, this had been her domain, a place where expectations were low and scrutiny was minimal, a hiding place that had served its purpose but had also confined her. Maria opened her locker and stared at the gray coveralls hanging inside. With deliberate movements, she removed them and folded them neatly, placing them on the bench alongside her maintenance ID badge. From her toolkit, she selected a single wrench, her first purchase when creating Maria Reyes, and slipped it into her pocket. A reminder of the woman she had been, and the strength she had found in her darkest moments. Ready? Daniels asked from the doorway. Maria nodded, taking one last look around the department that had been her sanctuary and her prison. Ready. The next morning, Maria arrived at Westmore wearing a tailored suit and carrying a briefcase instead of a toolbox. The security guard, who had barely glanced at her for 5 years now, stood at attention when she approached, noting the top-secret clearance badge prominently displayed. Good morning, Dr. Marquez, he said, with a respect that would have been unimaginable yesterday. Good morning, Michael, she replied, using his name for the first time despite having seen him nearly every day for 5 years. His surprise at her recognition was evident, but Maria simply smiled and continued through the checkpoint. The main atrium was buzzing with activity when she entered, many conversations halting as personnel noticed her transformed presence. On the central news screen, a Pentagon spokesperson was reading a statement. After an extensive investigation, the Department of Defense wishes to formally retract all allegations previously made against Dr. Elena Marquez and offer a public apology for the error. Dr. Marquez has been fully exonerated and reinstated to her position with appropriate promotions and compensation. Her groundbreaking work in weapons systems engineering continues to be vital to national security. Maria watched as her name was cleared publicly, officially ending 5 years of exile. The sensation was overwhelming. Vindication mixed with lingering resentment, relief tangled with the awareness that nothing could truly restore what had been taken from her. Quite a morning for you, observed Commander Vance, appearing at her side. Your team is assembled and waiting in Laboratory 12. They're eager to meet the legendary Dr. Marquez. Legendary might be overstating it. Maria replied dryly. Not according to Lieutenant Daniels' briefing. He's convinced you're going to revolutionize the entire AUSS program in a matter of weeks. Maria smiled slightly. Daniels has a flair for dramatic predictions. Perhaps, Vance agreed. But having seen what you did with our targeting system using nothing but maintenance tools, I'm inclined to believe him. As they walked toward Lab 12, Maria noticed Sam from the maintenance department staring at her in disbelief. She paused momentarily, acknowledging her former supervisor with a nod. "Dr. Marquez?" he questioned, the confusion evident in his voice as he looked between her and Commander Vance. "Hello, Sam," she replied. "I'd like to thank you for these past 5 years. You were a good boss." Sam shook his head in bewilderment. "I don't understand. You were—" "It's a long story," Maria said gently. "Perhaps I'll tell you sometime." Continuing toward the laboratory, Maria felt the weight of her dual identity. The maintenance worker who had survived through invisibility, and the brilliant engineer who had refused to remain hidden. Both were essential parts of who she had become. Outside Lab 12, Lieutenant Daniels waited alongside Sophia Chen and a team of engineers who would now be working under Maria's direction. The laboratory had been transformed overnight, new equipment installed, advanced computer systems configured, and the AUSS prototype prominently displayed on the central workstation. As Maria approached, Daniels straightened to attention. "Dr. Marquez," he announced formally, "your engineering team is assembled and ready for briefing." Maria surveyed the group before her. Some faces nervous, others curious, all watching to see how the infamous Dr. Marquez would lead after 5 years in professional exile. The weight of their expectations pressed against her, along with the knowledge that her success or failure here would define not just the AUSS project, but her entire second chance. For a moment, Maria Reyes's instinct to fade into the background threatened to overwhelm her. But then she felt the wrench in her pocket, the tangible reminder of the strength she had found in her darkest hours. And Dr. Elena Marquez stepped forward to claim her rightful place. "Thank you, Lieutenant," she said clearly, her voice carrying the authority she had suppressed for 5 years. "Let's get to work." 3 months into her return, Dr. Elena Marquez stood in the observation bay overlooking the underwater testing tank where the redesigned AUSS prototype glided through simulated ocean currents. Her engineering team watched nervously as the autonomous system navigated a complex obstacle course designed to mimic the unpredictable environments of contested waters. The drone moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost organic, anticipating changes in current, adjusting its sensors to compensate for visibility limitations, maintaining perfect stealth despite the challenging conditions. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Target acquisition in 3, 2, 1. Announced Lieutenant Daniels, who had become the primary military liaison for Elena's team. Perfect lock maintained through variable temperature gradient. All systems operating at optimal efficiency. A collective exhale rippled through the observation bay. 3 months of intensive redesign work had culminated in this moment. Proof that Elena's engineering vision was transforming a troubled project into a groundbreaking success. "Congratulations, Dr. Marquez," Commander Vance said, his voice carrying genuine respect. "You've accomplished in 12 weeks what our previous team couldn't achieve in 3 years." Elena nodded in acknowledgement, maintaining her professional composure despite the surge of vindication she felt. This wasn't just a successful test of an underwater drone. It was tangible proof that her brilliance had survived 5 years of deliberate suppression, that she could reclaim not just her name but her exceptional capabilities after years of pretending to be average. "The team deserves the credit," she replied, gesturing to the engineers who had worked tirelessly under her direction. "They implemented my vision with remarkable skill." It was true, her team had risen to every challenge she'd presented, though not without initial resistance. Many had been skeptical when she first proposed radical redesigns of systems they'd spent years developing. Some had openly questioned whether a woman who had spent 5 years changing light bulbs could possibly understand the complexities of cutting-edge military technology. Those doubts had evaporated quickly when Elena demonstrated her comprehensive understanding of not just the engineering principles behind the AUSS, but the quantum computing algorithms that drove its decision-making capabilities, and the advanced materials science that enabled its stealth functionality. Within weeks, skepticism had transformed into something approaching reverence as her team witnessed the depth and breadth of her expertise. "The Pentagon brass will be pleased," Vance continued. "They're flying in tomorrow for a demonstration. If this performance is replicated, they'll authorize full production immediately." Elena's eyes remained fixed on the drone as it completed the testing sequence with flawless precision. There's still room for improvement in the sonar processing array, and the battery efficiency could be increased by at least 12% with some modifications to the power distribution system. Commander Vance chuckled. "Always pushing for perfection. That's what makes you exceptional, Dr. Marquez." As the test concluded and her team began the process of retrieving the prototype, Elena felt Lieutenant Daniels' approach. "Permission to speak freely, Dr. Marquez?" he asked quietly. Elena turned to him with a raised eyebrow. Their professional relationship had evolved significantly since her return, with Daniels becoming both her strongest military advocate and the person most willing to challenge her when necessary. "When have you ever waited for permission, Lieutenant?" He smiled slightly. "You don't look like someone who just achieved a major breakthrough. In fact, you've had the same expression since the test began, like you're already solving the next 10 problems instead of celebrating this victory." Elena felt a flicker of irritation at his perception. In the 3 months since reclaiming her identity, she had maintained a rigorous professional distance from everyone at Westmore. Colleagues received polite, but limited engagement. Personal questions were deflected with technical discussions. Even Sophia's attempts at rekindling their friendship had been met with cordial but clear boundaries. "The work isn't finished," she replied tersely. "Success in controlled conditions doesn't guarantee performance in actual deployment." "True," Daniels acknowledged. "But sometimes, acknowledging progress is as important as identifying what remains to be done. Your team needs that acknowledgement, from you specifically." Elena glanced at her engineers, noticing their sidelong glances in her direction. They were waiting, she realized, for her reaction to their collective achievement. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "You're right," she conceded, surprising both Daniels and herself with the admission. With deliberate steps, Elena approached her team and raised her voice to address them collectively. "Today's test represents exceptional work from each of you," she began, watching their expressions shift from anxious anticipation to cautious pride. "The AUSS prototype is performing beyond original specifications because you were willing to challenge assumptions, revise approaches, and execute complex redesigns with precision. This is your achievement as much as it is mine." The impact of her words was immediate and visible. Shoulders straightened, smiles emerged, and the tension that had permeated the observation bay dissolved into genuine celebration. Elena realized that in her intense focus on proving her own worth through technical excellence, she had neglected the human element of leadership, the recognition that inspired people to push beyond their perceived limitations. Later that evening, as Elena reviewed test data in her newly assigned office, a spacious room with actual windows, unlike the maintenance closet she'd occupied for 5 years, she was interrupted by a knock at her door. Sophia Chen stood in the doorway, a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses in her hands. "I heard about the successful test," Sophia said tentatively. "I thought maybe we could celebrate, like old times." Elena hesitated, memories surfacing of countless evenings spent with Sophia discussing breakthrough ideas, celebrating successes, and supporting each other through failures. Before Hammond's betrayal had destroyed not just her career, but their friendship. "I have more work to do tonight," Elena replied, gesturing to the data displays covering her screens. Sophia's expression fell slightly, but she pressed on. "Elena, it's been 3 months since you came back. You've revolutionized the AUSS project, reclaimed your professional standing, and proven everyone who doubted you wrong, but you're still living like you're in exile. All work, no connections, no life outside this facility." "I'm focused on the project," Elena said stiffly. "It's what I was brought back to do." They brought back Dr. Elena Marquez, not just her engineering genius, Sophia countered, setting the champagne on a side table and approaching Elena's desk. The Elena I knew understood that breakthrough innovation doesn't come from isolation. It comes from connection, to ideas, to purpose, and to people. The words struck Elena with unexpected force. During her years as Maria Reyes, isolation had been a survival strategy, necessary to maintain her cover and protect herself from further betrayal. But now, with her identity restored and her innocence proven, that same isolation had become a self-imposed prison. "You abandoned me," Elena said quietly, giving voice to the pain she'd carried for 5 years. "When Hammond accused me, when everything was falling apart, you believed him over me? After everything we'd been through together." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "I did. And it's the greatest regret of my life. I let fear cloud my judgment. Fear of being associated with espionage allegations. Fear of losing my own career. Fear of having misjudged someone I thought I knew completely." She placed a folder on Elena's desk. "This is why I'm here tonight. These are the letters I wrote you every month for the past 3 years, since I first began to suspect Hammond wasn't telling the truth. Letters I could never send because no one knew where you were." Elena stared at the folder, at the dozens of letters inside, each dated and sealed. Evidence of Sophia's remorse and her eventual recognition of the truth. "I can't change what I did," Sophia continued, "but I can tell you that watching you work these past 3 months, seeing your brilliance, your resilience, your unwavering commitment to excellence, despite everything you've endured, has reminded me of who you really are, and made me miss the friend I lost through my own cowardice." Elena remained silent, her hands resting on the folder but not opening it. "You don't have to forgive me," Sophia said softly. "But please don't let what happened turn you into someone who never trusts again. The world needs the full Elena Marquez, not just her engineering genius, but her passion, her vision, and her humanity." After Sophia left, Elena sat alone in her office, the unopened folder of letters before her and the champagne untouched. Her mind drifted to the maintenance department where she had spent 5 years living as someone else, someone who fixed broken machinery with quiet competence, but never revealed the full extent of her capabilities or allowed herself genuine connections. The harsh truth was that Maria Reyes had been a necessary fiction but also a kind of surrender, an acceptance that the world's betrayal required her to diminish herself for survival. Now, with her name cleared and her professional status restored, she was still living with the emotional aftermath of that betrayal, still holding everyone at a distance, still reluctant to reveal herself fully. With slow, deliberate movements, Elena opened the folder and began reading Sophia's letters. They chronicled her former friend's journey, from initial doubt to growing suspicion of Hammond, to active investigation of discrepancies in his accusations, and finally to the devastating realization that she had betrayed an innocent colleague. The pain and regret in Sophia's words were palpable, as was her continued affection for Elena, despite years of separation. When Elena finally looked up from the letters, dawn was breaking over the mountains, visible through her office window. She had read through the night, absorbing Sophia's perspective and confronting her own lingering wounds. The realization that struck her most profoundly was not about Sophia's actions or even Hammond's betrayal. It was about the choice she now faced. She could continue living as a brilliant but isolated engineer, using professional excellence as a shield against vulnerability. Or she could risk trusting again, understanding that connection brought both potential pain and essential humanity. The decision crystallized as Elena watched the sunrise illuminate the landscape. Maria Reyes had survived through isolation. Elena Marquez would thrive through connection. The Pentagon delegation arrived that afternoon with considerable fanfare. Generals, admirals, and civilian defense officials filling the demonstration area to witness the AUSS prototype in action. Elena had spent the morning with her team, reviewing test parameters and preparing the drone for its most important performance yet. "Dr. Marquez," General Preston greeted her warmly. "The reports of your progress have been remarkable. We are eager to see the results firsthand." Elena nodded professionally. "The team has prepared a comprehensive demonstration of the system's capabilities. We'll be testing in conditions that exceed deployment requirements by approximately 20% to demonstrate operational margins." As the officials took their places in the observation area, Elena noticed Sophia standing at the back of the room, offering an encouraging smile. Beside her was Lieutenant Daniels, whose quiet confidence in her abilities had never wavered since the day he'd recognized the engineer behind the maintenance worker's eyes. "Begin primary demonstration sequence." Elena instructed her team, her voice calm and authoritative. For the next hour, the AUSS prototype performed flawlessly through increasingly difficult scenarios, navigating complex underwater terrain, maintaining stealth while tracking multiple targets, adapting to sudden environmental changes, and processing massive data streams with unprecedented efficiency. The Pentagon officials watched with growing enthusiasm as each test confirmed the system's superiority over existing technologies. "Extraordinary," murmured the Secretary of Defense, an older woman who had made a special trip to witness the demonstration. "This exceeds our highest expectations." As the final test concluded, Elena stepped forward to address the delegation. "What you've witnessed today represents not just technological advancement but a new paradigm in autonomous undersea systems. The AUSS platform is fully scalable, adaptable to multiple mission profiles, and designed with modular components that can be upgraded as new technologies emerge." The confidence in her voice was matched by the straight-backed posture that had replaced Maria Reyes's deliberate hunch. This was Dr. Elena Marquez in her element, brilliant, authoritative, and unapologetically exceptional. "I understand you achieved these results in just 3 months," said Admiral Chen, the Navy's representative, "after the previous team spent years with minimal progress. How do you explain the dramatic improvement?" Elena considered her response carefully. The expected answer would focus on technical innovations or management deficiency. The safe, professional explanation that maintained appropriate distance. Instead, she chose a different path. "The breakthrough came from perspective," she said. "For 5 years, I worked as a maintenance technician at this facility, fixing air handlers, replacing light fixtures, and observing how complex systems fail in predictable patterns. That experience taught me to see engineering problems differently, from the ground up rather than the top down." A murmur of surprise rippled through the delegation. Though Elena's story had been officially acknowledged in the Pentagon statement, hearing her reference her time as a maintenance worker so directly was unexpected. "Most engineering failures occur at intersection points, where theoretical design meets practical implementation," she continued. "My years in maintenance gave me unique insight into those intersection points. It taught me that the most elegant solution isn't always the most complex or sophisticated. Sometimes it's the one that acknowledges how systems actually behave in real-world conditions." Admiral Chen nodded thoughtfully. "An unexpected benefit from an unfortunate situation." "Not unfortunate," Elena corrected gently, illuminating. "Those 5 years weren't just about survival. They were about gaining perspective. I couldn't have acquired any other way." Maria Reyes taught Dr. Marquez how to see blind spots that expertise often creates. The Admiral's eyebrows rose at her candor, but his expression was one of respect rather than discomfort. "Well said, Doctor. And a valuable lesson for all of us about the dangers of dismissing contributions based on title or position." As the delegation moved to examine the prototype more closely, Elena felt Lieutenant Daniels' approach. "That was quite a statement," he observed quietly. Not the safe, technical response they were expecting. Elena smiled slightly. "I'm learning that safety and growth rarely occupy the same space." "Speaking of growth," Daniels replied, "there's something you should see." He led her to a side entrance where Sam from the maintenance department waited awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable among the high-ranking officials and advanced technology. "Dr. Marquez," Sam began hesitantly, "we wanted to show you something." "We?" Elena questioned. Sam gestured to the maintenance team gathered behind him, the same people who had worked alongside Maria Reyes for 5 years, without ever suspecting her true capabilities. They looked out of place in their gray coveralls amidst the polished uniforms and expensive suits of the Pentagon delegation. After we found out who you really are," Sam continued, "we got to thinking about all the systems you maintained over the years. How you always seemed to fix things in ways that made them work better than before, not just back to normal." He handed her a tablet displaying maintenance records spanning her 5 years at Westmore. "We analyzed your repair approaches. There were patterns we never noticed before, ways you recalibrated systems that increased efficiency, reduced energy consumption, and extended operational lifespans." Elena took the tablet, surprised by their initiative and the thoroughness of their analysis. The facility's overall energy usage dropped 18% during your time in maintenance, Sam explained. Equipment failure rates decreased by 24%. We thought these were just random improvements, but looking back, we can see your engineering expertise in every repair, subtle changes that collectively transformed the facility's operations without anyone noticing. Elena scrolled through the data, seeing for the first time the quantifiable impact of work she had performed deliberately below her capabilities. Even while hiding her true identity, she had been unable to completely suppress her instinct for optimization and improvement. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked. Sam straightened his posture, a new confidence in his bearing. "Because we've implemented your methodologies across all maintenance protocols. The entire team is now trained to approach repairs using the principles we extracted from your work. We're calling it the Marquez method." Elena was speechless. The maintenance team, people who had barely acknowledged her existence for 5 years, had not only recognized her contributions, but had formalized them into a systematic approach that would continue improving the facility long after her direct involvement ended. "That's remarkable," she managed finally. "No, Doctor," Sam replied with unexpected conviction. "What's remarkable is that even when you were forced to hide who you really were, you still found ways to make everything around you better. You never stopped being exceptional. You just channeled it differently." The simplicity and truth of his observations struck Elena deeply. Throughout her exile as Maria Reyes, she had believed she was suppressing her true nature, diminishing her capabilities to remain unnoticed. But these maintenance records told a different story. She hadn't stopped being Dr. Elena Marquez. She had simply expressed her brilliance through different means. As the maintenance team returned to their duties and the Pentagon officials continued their examination of the AUSS prototype, Elena found herself standing between two worlds: the high-level engineering environment where her genius was now openly recognized, and the practical, hands-on realm of maintenance where that same genius had operated in shadow for 5 years. The integration of these worlds, she realized, was her unique contribution. Not just the technical innovations that had transformed the AUSS project, but the perspective that bridged theoretical brilliance with practical implementation. Lieutenant Daniels rejoined her, his expression thoughtful. "You know, when I first realized who you really were, I thought the maintenance worker was just a disguise, a necessary fiction for survival. Now I'm not so sure." Elena looked at him questioningly. "Maria Reyes wasn't just a cover identity," he explained. "She was a different expression of the same exceptional mind. Maybe the real breakthrough with the AUSS wasn't about reclaiming your old identity, but about integrating both perspectives." As Elena considered his insight, General Preston approached with the Secretary of Defense. "Dr. Marquez," the Secretary began, "the demonstration was extraordinary. We'd like to discuss expanding your role beyond the AUSS project, perhaps heading an entirely new division focused on integrated systems design." Elena felt the weight of the opportunity, a chance to not just reclaim her former status but to exceed it, to shape military technology at the highest levels, with resources and authority beyond what she'd held before her exile. "I'm honored by the offer," she replied carefully, "but before I consider it, there's something I'd like to propose." The Secretary nodded encouragingly. "Go on." "The success of the AUSS project came from bridging theoretical design with practical implementation knowledge. I'd like to formalize that approach through a new apprenticeship program, bringing maintenance personnel into the engineering design process from the beginning, rather than only after systems are deployed." General Preston looked skeptical. "Maintenance staff participating in classified weapons design, that's unprecedented. So is a chief engineer spending 5 years in maintenance," Elena countered. "I've experienced both worlds, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that we're wasting valuable insights by maintaining rigid hierarchies between those who design systems and those who maintain them." The Secretary studied Elena with newfound interest. "You're proposing a fundamental restructuring of how we approach weapons development." "I'm proposing that innovation flourishes at intersection points," Elena clarified. "Between theory and practice, between expertise and experience, between different perspectives approaching the same problem. My journey from Dr. Marquez to Maria Reyes and back again has shown me that brilliance isn't confined to credentials or titles. It exists throughout our organizations, often in places we never think to look." As the Pentagon officials exchanged glances, Elena felt a sense of perfect clarity about her path forward. She had spent 5 years hiding her light, Then 3 months, proving it still burned as brightly as ever. Now it was time for something new, using her unique dual perspective to illuminate possibilities others couldn't see. The secretary's smile was both surprised and impressed. "Draft me a proposal, Doctor. I think you may have identified not just a technological breakthrough, but an institutional one as well." Later that evening, as the delegation departed and the facility settled into its night rhythm, Elena found herself walking the familiar path to the maintenance department. The space was quiet at this hour, with only the emergency lights illuminating the tools hanging in their appointed places. Her hand reached automatically for the locker that had once been hers, still labeled Reyes, though now used by someone else. The muscle memory of 5 years couldn't be erased in 3 months. "Saying goodbye?" asked Sophia's voice from the doorway. Elena turned, surprised to find her former friend, perhaps current friend again, watching her with understanding eyes. "Not goodbye," Elena replied thoughtfully. "Integration." Sophia stepped further into the room. "The secretary was impressed by your proposal. Word is she's already discussing implementation strategies with her staff." "It's a start," Elena acknowledged. "A small step toward recognizing that innovation doesn't just flow from the top down." "And what about you?" Sophia asked gently. "Have you decided whether to accept the division director position?" Elena considered the question, her gaze moving from the maintenance locker to the high-security badge now clipped to her blazer. 5 years ago, such an offer would have represented the pinnacle of success, validation of her brilliance and vindication against those who had doubted her. Now her definition of success had evolved. It wasn't about personal recognition or positional authority. It was about creating systems where everyone's contributions were valued, where artificial hierarchies didn't prevent good ideas from flourishing, where brilliance was recognized regardless of title or background. "I'll accept," Elena said finally, "but not because it restores what was taken from me, because it provides a platform to implement what I've learned since then." Sophia smiled, genuine warmth in her expression. The Elena Marquez who disappeared 5 years ago would have taken the position to prove her worth. The woman standing before me now takes it to create worth for others. "Maria Reyes taught me that," Elena replied, surprised by the ease with which she now acknowledged her alter ego's contributions to her development. "She showed me that sometimes our greatest growth comes when we're forced to express ourselves through unexpected channels." As they left the maintenance department together, Elena felt a sense of completion, not because she had reclaimed her former identity, but because she had integrated the wisdom of both her lives into something entirely new. The brilliant engineer and the practical maintenance worker now existed within her simultaneously, each perspective enriching the other. The path forward wasn't about choosing between these identities or proving which one had greater value. It was about honoring the unique insights that emerged from their intersection and creating spaces where others could contribute their brilliance, regardless of where they stood in the organizational hierarchy. In losing everything 5 years ago, Elena had gained a perspective that now positioned her to transform not just military technology, but the very systems that created it. The journey from Dr. Marquez to Maria Reyes and back again hadn't diminished her. It had expanded her vision beyond what either identity alone could have achieved. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Elena's corner office at the newly established Integrated Systems Innovation Division. 1 year had passed since her identity had been revealed, and the transformation in both her life and the Westmore facility was profound. On her desk sat a framed photograph, not of awards or accomplishments, but of the first graduating class of the maintenance engineering apprenticeship program she had created, their faces beaming with pride as they held certificates that bridged 2 worlds previously kept separate. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Elena had spent the past year implementing her vision for a revolutionary approach to defense technology development, one that dissolved traditional boundaries between designers and maintainers, between theoretical brilliance and practical wisdom. The results had exceeded even her optimistic projections, with new innovations emerging at twice the previous rate and implementation failures dropping by 60%. The Marquez method, as it had become known throughout the defense community, was changing not just what was built, but how it was conceived, tested, and deployed. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Lieutenant Colonel Jason Daniels, recently promoted and now the primary military coordinator for her division, stood in the doorway with a tablet in hand. "Morning, Elena." He greeted her with the easy familiarity that had developed between them over the past year. The final test results from the Northwestern trials just came in. Thought you'd want to see them immediately. Elena smiled, gesturing for him to enter. Their professional relationship had evolved from mutual respect into a genuine partnership, with Daniels providing the operational perspective that complemented her technical vision. Though they maintained appropriate professional boundaries, Elena had come to value his insight almost as much as she valued Sophia's friendship, which had gradually been rebuilt through shared work and honest conversations about the past. "How bad is it?" quote, she asked, noting the tension in his posture. "See for yourself," Daniels replied, handing her the tablet. Elena scanned the data quickly, her engineer's mind processing the results with practiced efficiency. The Northwestern trials had been the most ambitious test yet of her integrated approach, a complete weapons platform designed collaboratively by engineers and maintenance personnel, with input from field operators throughout the process. The performance metrics displayed on the screen were unprecedented, exceeding benchmarks by margins that would have seemed impossible just a year ago. "This can't be right," she murmured, double-checking the calculations. "The energy efficiency alone is 30% better than our projections." Daniels smiled, the tension in his posture revealing itself as barely contained excitement rather than concern. "Those aren't calculation errors. The system is performing exactly as shown. Your approach worked, Elena. Better than anyone predicted." The validation should have been enough, but Elena found herself looking beyond the impressive statistics to the human stories they represented. How did the maintenance engineering teams handle the field adjustments during testing? "That's the most remarkable part," Daniels replied, taking a seat across from her desk. "When environmental conditions changed unexpectedly on day 3, they adapted the system configuration in real time. No delays, no requisitions for specialized equipment, no complicated approval chains, just immediate, effective solutions implemented on the spot. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. Elena nodded, a deeper satisfaction settling in her chest. This was the true measure of her vision's success. Not just improved technical specifications, but a fundamentally more responsive and adaptable approach to complex challenges. "The Pentagon delegation arrives at 1,400 hours, Daniels continued. "General Preston says the Secretary of Defense will be with them. Apparently, the Northwestern results have accelerated interest in implementing your methodology across all defense technology platforms." Elena's gaze drifted to the window, where she could see the original maintenance building that had been her home for 5 years. The facility had expanded significantly over the past year, with new laboratories and collaborative workspaces constructed specifically for her integrated teams. But she had insisted that the maintenance department remain in its original location, a physical reminder of the wisdom that had been hiding in plain sight before her approach revealed it. "We should include Sam in the presentation," she said decisively. "Have him explain how the maintenance perspective influenced the power distribution redesign." Daniels raised an eyebrow. "You want the head of maintenance to brief the Secretary of Defense on advanced weapons systems technology?" "Exactly," Elena confirmed with a smile. "It's time to show them that the Marquez method isn't just a theoretical framework. It's a living demonstration that brilliance exists at every level of an organization when we create the conditions for it to emerge." As Daniels left to make the arrangements, Elena found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From celebrated engineer to disgraced outcast, from invisible maintenance worker to transformative leader, each stage had contributed essential elements to her current perspective. The betrayal that had once seemed like the end of her career had ultimately been the catalyst for its most significant evolution. Her intercom buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. "Dr. Marquez, there's someone here to see you. He says he's an old colleague, but he doesn't have an appointment." Elena frowned. Most of her former colleagues had reconnected with her over the past year, offering congratulations on her vindication or seeking opportunities to collaborate. "Did he give a name?" "Dr. David Hammond." The name hit Elena like a physical blow. David Hammond, her former mentor, the man who had framed her for espionage, the architect of her professional destruction, and 5-year exile. The man who should have been serving a life sentence in a federal supermax prison. "Dr. Marquez?" her assistant prompted when she didn't immediately respond. Elena took a steadying breath. "Have security escort him to conference room B." Alert Lieutenant Colonel Daniels immediately. And contact General Preston's office. I need to know why Hammond isn't in prison. Within minutes, Elena stood in the observation room adjacent to Conference Room B, watching through one-way glass as security officers seated Hammond at the conference table. He looked smaller than she remembered, older, his once commanding presence diminished by prison-issue clothing and handcuffs that secured him to the table. "What the hell is he doing here?" Daniels demanded as he entered the observation room, his voice tight with protective anger. "He should be in Florence ADX for the rest of his life." "I'm waiting for clarification from General Preston," Elena replied, studying Hammond's face for clues to his unexpected appearance. "But I intend to find out directly." Before Daniels could object, Elena moved toward the door connecting the two rooms. "I need to do this," she said quietly, "not just for closure, but to understand what he represents." Daniels nodded reluctantly. "I'll be right here watching. At the first sign of trouble—" "I know," Elena interrupted with a grateful smile. "You'll break down the door and extract me with extreme prejudice. But that won't be necessary." As she entered the conference room, Hammond's head snapped up, his eyes widening with recognition. "Elena," he breathed, a complex mixture of emotions crossing his face. "You look remarkable." Elena took the seat across from him, maintaining deliberate eye contact. This was not Maria Reyes shrinking from attention, nor the wounded Dr. Marquez seeking vindication. This was Elena fully integrated, confident in her capabilities, secure in her identity, unafraid of confronting the past. "Why are you here, David?" she asked directly. "And why aren't you in prison?" Hammond's gaze dropped momentarily before returning to meet hers. "I'm still in prison. I'm here under supervised release for a very specific purpose." He gestured to the security officer standing at attention behind him. "These gentlemen ensure I don't stray from that purpose." "Which is?" "To apologize," Hammond said quietly, "and to give you information that might help protect what you've built here." Elena's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You destroyed my career, framed me for espionage, and forced me into hiding for 5 years. Why would I believe anything you have to say now?" "You shouldn't," Hammond acknowledged, surprising her with his candor. "I've given you every reason to distrust me, but the information I have isn't for my benefit. It's for yours, and for the country's security." He leaned forward as far as his restraints would allow. "Elena, there are people who are very unhappy about the success of your integrated approach. People who see the dissolution of traditional hierarchies as a threat to their power and position. People who would sabotage your work, just as I once sabotaged your career." Elena studied him carefully, looking for signs of manipulation or deception. "You're claiming there's another conspiracy? That's convenient, David. Almost as convenient as your sudden attack of conscience." "My conscience has nothing to do with it," Hammond replied with unexpected honesty. "I'm helping because the prosecutor offered a slight reduction in my sentence in exchange for intelligence about my former contacts, people who might target Westmore specifically because of your success." This explanation made more sense to Elena than sudden remorse. Hammond had always been transactional, looking for advantage even in the direst circumstances. "What exactly are you suggesting?" she asked. "Your Integrated Systems Innovation Division has disrupted more than just defense technology development," Hammond explained. "It's challenging fundamental power structures in the military-industrial complex. By elevating maintenance personnel to design partners, you're threatening traditional gatekeeping mechanisms that have kept decision-making concentrated among a select few." Elena considered this perspective. She had focused primarily on the technological and organizational benefits of her approach, paying less attention to the power dynamics it disrupted. But Hammond's warning resonated with subtle resistance she had encountered over the past year: bureaucratic obstacles, funding delays, questioning of results that should have spoken for themselves. "You have specific information about threats to the program?" she pressed. Hammond nodded. "Names, dates, planned interference with your Northwestern test results." "The prosecutors have the details. I'm just the messenger, making my final contribution to national security before spending the rest of my life in federal custody." The bitterness in his tone suggested this cooperation wasn't entirely voluntary, lending credibility to his warning. "Why warn me personally?" Elena asked, the most important question still unanswered. "You could have provided this information to investigators without requesting a meeting." Hammond's expression shifted, a flash of genuine emotion breaking through his calculated exterior. "Because I wanted to see it for myself, what you've built after everything I did to destroy you. I wanted to see if Elena Marquez could really rise from the ashes I created." He gestured toward the window, indicating the expanded facility visible beyond. "When I framed you, I thought I was eliminating a threat to my operation. I never imagined I was actually creating something far more powerful than you would have been if left alone." For the first time, Elena saw real regret in Hammond's eyes. Not for the moral wrong he had committed against her, but for the miscalculation that had transformed her from a brilliant but conventional engineer into a revolutionary force. 5 years as a maintenance worker gave you insights none of us with our prestigious positions and advanced degrees ever acquired, Hammond continued. "You're changing everything, Elena, not just weapon systems, but the entire approach to innovation. And that makes you more dangerous to certain interests than you ever were before." Elena absorbed this assessment, recognizing the truth in it. Her integrated approach wasn't just a technical methodology. It was a challenge to entrenched power structures that had defined defense technology development for generations. "Thank you for the warning," she said finally, rising from her chair. "I'll ensure the proper authorities receive any intelligence you've provided." As she turned to leave, Hammond called after her. "Elena, I am sorry. Not that it matters, but I am." She paused at the door, considering her response carefully. "You're right, David. It doesn't matter. But what does matter is that your attempt to destroy me ultimately made me stronger. You thought you were ending my contribution to national security, but you actually transformed it into something far more significant." The satisfaction in Hammond's expression faded, replaced by the realization that his greatest act of sabotage had ironically catalyzed Elena's most important work. "The maintenance worker you forced me to become taught the engineer I already was the most valuable lesson of her career," Elena concluded. "So in a strange way, I should thank you for that, even as I ensure you never have the opportunity to harm anyone else again." With those words, she left Hammond to his guards and his regrets, returning to the observation room where Daniels waited. "You handled that remarkably well," he observed. "I'd have been tempted to throw something at him." Elena smiled slightly. "A year ago, I might have, but I've learned that moving forward is more powerful than looking back." Hammond represents a way of thinking that's becoming obsolete, hierarchical, secretive, and fundamentally limiting. What we're building here is the future. As they walked back toward her office, Daniels updated her on the Pentagon's response to Hammond's information. "General Preston confirms they've been investigating potential interference with your program. The warning adds specific details, but they were already monitoring the situation. The Secretary of Defense is personally committed to protecting your work." "Good," Elena nodded. "Because we're just getting started." The afternoon presentation to the Pentagon delegation unfolded exactly as Elena had envisioned. Sam, the maintenance department head who had once been Maria Reyes' supervisor, stood confidently before the Secretary of Defense explaining complex power distribution innovations his team had contributed to the Northwestern prototype. The formerly rigid boundaries between maintenance personnel and engineers had dissolved into a fluid exchange of knowledge and perspective that produced solutions neither group could have developed independently. "What Dr. Marquez has created here," Sam concluded with newfound eloquence, "isn't just a new approach to technology development. It's a recognition that innovation doesn't respect organizational charts or job titles. It emerges when we create environments where everyone's expertise is valued, whether it comes from advanced degrees or decades of hands-on experience." The secretary nodded approvingly. "The results speak for themselves. 30% improvement in core metrics, implementation failures nearly eliminated, and development timelines cut in half. But what impresses me most is the cultural transformation. You've changed not just what these teams build, but how they think about their work and each other." Quote, Elena felt a surge of pride, not in her individual contribution, but in the collective achievement of people who had been empowered to collaborate across previously impermeable boundaries. "The transformation was always possible," she replied. "The capabilities were always there. We just needed to create conditions where they could flourish together rather than separately." As the delegation continued their tour of the facility, Elena found herself walking alongside Sophia, who had become the scientific director for the division's research component. "Hammond's warning has everyone on edge," Sophia observed quietly. "But it also validates what you've accomplished. You wouldn't be facing resistance if you weren't changing things that powerful people want to remain the same." Elena nodded thoughtfully. A year ago, I was focused on reclaiming what was taken from me, my reputation, my status, my professional identity. Now I realize that was thinking too small. The real opportunity was never about restoration. It was about transformation. They paused at a window overlooking one of the collaborative workspaces where engineers and maintenance personnel were gathered around a prototype, engaged in animated discussion that bridged their formerly separate worlds. "Look at them," Sophia said with genuine wonder. A year ago, they wouldn't even have been in the same room together. The engineers would have designed something in isolation, and the maintenance team would have struggled to implement and maintain it without understanding the underlying principles. And both groups would have blamed each other for the inevitable failures, Elena added. Instead, they're creating solutions together that neither could develop alone. That's the real innovation, not the technology itself, but the integration of perspectives that produces it. The tour concluded in the original maintenance department, which Elena had insisted on preserving as both a working facility and a symbolic reminder of the division's origin story. Here, amid tool cabinets and workbenches, the Secretary of Defense addressed the assembled teams. "What you've accomplished here represents more than technological advancement," she began, her voice carrying the authority of her office, but also genuine admiration. "It represents a fundamental rethinking of how innovation occurs within complex organizations." Dr. Marquez's journey from celebrated engineer to maintenance worker and back again has revealed blind spots in our traditional approach, blind spots that have limited our capabilities for generations. The secretary turned to Elena. "The President has authorized immediate implementation of the Marquez method across all defense technology platforms. Moreover, he has approved the establishment of a National Integrated Innovation Center under your direction, with a mandate to extend these principles beyond defense into civilian infrastructure, medical technology, and space exploration." The announcement triggered applause that echoed through the maintenance bay, applause from engineers in pressed shirts and maintenance workers in gray coveralls, united in their appreciation of a vision that valued both equally. Later that evening, as the delegation departed and the facility quieted, Elena found herself once again in the maintenance department. The space held different memories now, not just of 5 years in hiding, but of the past year's transformation that had started here. "Full circle," observed Lieutenant Colonel Daniels, joining her in the quiet space. "From fixing air handlers to revolutionizing national innovation policy. Quite a journey." Elena smiled, running her hand along a workbench that had once been her daily station. "Not full circle," she corrected gently. "Spiral. We return to similar points, but at a higher level of understanding. The maintenance worker and the engineer now exist simultaneously, each perspective enriching the other." "And what's next on this spiral journey?" Daniels asked. "The National Center represents an opportunity to extend your approach beyond defense technology." "That's a significant expansion of scope." Elena nodded, having already considered the implications of the President's authorization. "The principles remain the same, regardless of the technology domain. Create environments where diverse perspectives collaborate without artificial hierarchies. Recognize that innovation emerges at intersection points between different types of expertise. Value practical wisdom as highly as theoretical knowledge." Quote. She turned to face Daniels directly. "The specific applications will vary. Medical technology has different requirements than defense systems. Infrastructure faces different challenges than space exploration. But the fundamental approach transcends these differences." "The Marquez method," Daniels said with a smile. "From personal vindication to national innovation strategy in just 1 year. Not bad for someone who was changing light bulbs this time last year." Elena shook her head, correcting him gently. "That's still missing the point. This was never about vindicating Elena Marquez. It was about recognizing that Elena and Maria were both essential parts of a larger truth, that brilliance exists throughout our organizations, often in places we never think to look." As they walked through the facility one last time before heading home, Elena reflected on the strange, painful, ultimately transformative journey that had brought her to this moment. Hammond's betrayal had seemed like an ending, the destruction of everything she had worked to build. Instead, it had been the catalyst for a much more profound contribution than she would have made if left on her original path. 5 years as Maria Reyes had taught Dr. Elena Marquez to see what her expertise had previously rendered invisible, the practical wisdom that existed in maintenance bays and workrooms, the innovative thinking that occurred at the front lines of implementation. the brilliant solutions that emerged when artificial hierarchies were dissolved. The maintenance worker who fixed air handlers with quiet competence and the celebrated engineer who designed cutting-edge weapons systems had finally integrated into a single identity, one that recognized brilliance could wear coveralls as easily as lab coats, and that the future of innovation lay not in separating these worlds but in bringing them together. As Elena prepared to expand her vision to a national scale, she carried with her the most important lesson from her dual journey. True transformation rarely comes from where or whom we expect. Sometimes it emerges from our greatest setbacks, sometimes from people and places we've been taught to overlook, and sometimes, most powerfully, from the integration of perspectives that conventional wisdom insists should remain separate. In the end, Maria Reyes hadn't been a disguise Elena was forced to wear during her exile. She had been an essential teacher, revealing truths that Dr. Marquez would never have discovered without walking in the maintenance worker's steel-toed boots. The integration of these identities had created something more powerful than either could have been alone, a vision for innovation that was changing not just what was possible, but who was empowered to create it. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bells so you don't miss any upload from us.